This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. The following CareLab podcast does not provide health or medical advice. All content is provided for information purposes only. Listeners are encouraged to speak with their healthcare provider for specific healthcare advice and are wholly responsible for the outcome of implementing any tips or information presented.
Good morning. Welcome to the CareLab.
We're here again. I love it.
Okay, before we get started on anything serious today, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What's your lottery city?
My lottery city? What does that mean?
Yeah, that means like if you win the lottery.
Oh.
And you could live anywhere on earth. Like money is no issue. Where would you go?
Oh, money is no issue where I go. It's not city, it's country. And I think I will definitely leave this country. And I don't know if money were no object that opens it up. We've already considered where we're going. And I think it's Belize. But that's also effective and essentially affordable. Like I could see that in my actual future. So if I was like something completely ridiculous that I have no idea if I can actually achieve, I don't know. It might be like, I don't know, my own island. That's what it would be. My own island somewhere in the Caribbean where you can buy like a little bitty island for yourself. That's what I would do.
Dang, you dream big.
Yes, absolutely.
Mine was San Diego. Where I have lived before, actually.
That's completely uncreative. You already lived there.
It's true, but it's such a wonderful place to live. Like, it's just, the weather is so great, and there's so many things to do. Within an hour of San Diego, you could be in the desert, you could be in the mountains, in the forest, you can be rock climbing, you can be at the beach, like, you can just be in pretty much any.
That is the awesome thing about California, yeah. Yeah.
You can be in almost any climate that you want to be doing, almost any activity that you want to be doing within a very short distance.
Mm-hmm.
And and also, like, I'm assuming I've won the lottery, then I'm going to live somewhere very cool in San Diego. Like, I'm going to live in La Jolla.
Oh, gotcha.
Or, I'm going to live on the beach in La Jolla, or I'm going to live... I'm going to live on Coronado Island, which is like so cool,
mm-hmm.
but it's a lot, but that's like lottery money for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine, being like a real person. I don't know what all those people do for a living.
They can do something.
Unless they're in the Navy and they have like Navy housing on Coronado, in which case, like, I'm jealous of you.
Thank you for serving our country.
Thank you for your service. When my husband was at 32nd Street, we lived in La Mesa, because you don't get housing on Coronado unless you serve on Coronado. But anyway, so yeah, no, mine is not that. Mine is super uncreative. I just think, but it's a nice place to be.
So you already know it's a nice place to be. So that part is good.
It's also like I have a lot of family. I do have family in San Diego, but like the rest of my family is within probably a 4-hour drive of San Diego.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be easy to see them all. And like right now we're so far away from them. It's kind of a bummer because I like love my family. I'm super close with them. So that's the other reason. I know. Just like want to be near my peeps.
I know it sounds ridiculous. That's super important actually. But the way I think about Belize and why we think of that as like a place that we could maybe retire to or something like that is because Southwest flies there. And so it wouldn't be that hard or that expensive, relatively still flying, to go there. Whereas some other places, it takes like plane after plane after plane. You take 24 hours to get there. I'm for world traveling, clearly. But Belize is like accessible.
I've never been to Belize, but I've always really wanted to go because the photos look amazing.
It's beautiful.
Like I want to stay in like one of those like little huts on the water.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like the most amazing thing in the world to do.
It's chill. There's lots of nature.
Have you done that?
I've been there. Yeah. I've been to Belize. Yeah.
That's cool.
And it's amazing. It's an amazing place. Culture is awesome. It's great.
I'm a big fan of Costa Rica, where I actually have been.
Mm-hmm.
People are just so like kind, and the food is amazing and there's so much to do. You gotta live somewhere where there's a lot of stuff to do.
I agree.
I feel like.
Yeah. You need stuff to
You can
fill
only
your
sit
life.
on the beach for so long.
Exactly.
Okay. I feel like you learn a lot about someone by knowing what their lottery city is. And
That's probably fair.
I think it's a good cold open question if you like are trying to get to know someone. What's your lottery city? Safe. You'll learn a lot about them. Someone says, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a really weird one.
You learned I'm trying to get out this country?
Yeah, I learned you're trying to leave.
I'm actively trying to leave.
Actively trying to leave. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to CareLab?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so this question came in. It's about one of my favorite topics to talk about, actually, which is going to sound weird once everyone hears the question. But the question had to do with like constipation, basically.
Yeah.
And what are some things that can be done to help deal with constipation? I think the context for this question was for like a loved one that someone is caring for. But of course, constipation can be universal. So
it is.
And there are so many functional ways actually to help manage constipation. And constipation is, I'm going to see how many times I can say constipation in about 30 seconds. But it's not just like an uncomfortable thing. It's actually can be a really significant medical issue. Like it can become an emergency medical issue. So it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So let's talk about poop.
Yeah. And it can be chronic too. Like, if you just happen to have a little bit of constipation and then you can deal with it real quick and you don't have it for a long time, great. But if it happens on a regular basis, we need to have some regular strategies to deal with it.
So I'm going to let you start it off. What are when someone's asking you about constipation or which kind of comes up sideways in the conversation, right? We're talking about toileting.
Yep.
And then, eventually it kind of gets into that issue. What's your kind of first go-to?
Okay, I run down my list of, like you said, there's a lot of functional ways to manage it. So I run down my list of things. The first thing I say is, well, how much water have you been drinking? And do you drink plenty of water? So if they do that already, then we move on to the next one. So my first one is water.
I always ask people to, because sometimes we think we're drinking a lot of water, but actually maybe we're not drinking enough water. And so I ask people to, if chronic constipation is an issue for someone, I'll ask them to keep like a water diary.
Yeah.
Or like a drinking diary, essentially saying, what they're drinking and how much they're drinking and when they're drinking it. And you can learn so much just by writing those things down and having a record about whether or not you really are drinking as much as you need to, or maybe if you're drinking things that are helping versus maybe drinking things that are not helping with your poop situation.
Yep. So water's my first one. Second one is movements and how much movement we're doing. And like, depending on the context I'm talking to the person, I might already know a lot about their limited or lack of movement. And so we can dive into like some strategies for getting more movement in and tie it to why it's connected to your constipation. It's not, we're not a silo and everything works together. And sometimes people don't think about it that way, that your system is a system. And it's not just about taking some X-Lax or whatever, that it's more about the things that you do every day. So you have regular things happen. The things that are supposed to be regular in your body are happening regularly.
Yeah. And part of course, so our bowels actually use this system called peristalsis, which is where like the intestines actually help to move material through the bowels and through the intestines. But beyond that, like peristalsis is not usually enough on its own to help create like regular, healthy bowel movements. The other part of it is, like you said, having like movement in the rest of your body. Everything does work together. And if you think about it, like if you're sitting still all day in one position, or if you're laying down,
key one.
That's kind of the next thing that we'll talk about, I think, is like gravity, right? But then you don't have the benefit of having, all of this movement, your abdominals muscles shifting around and everything kind of working together to help move your poop out of your body. And you really do need to have, like, your body's basically, it's just not built to be still.
It's not. Your body's built for movement.
it's built to move. And so everything in your body is built to work with that movement, including your bowel movements. And so when you're not moving, we start to see a lot more issues with constipation. And it can be something as simple as, making sure that you're getting up and moving more can be a huge help to when you are dealing with chronic constipation or someone is.
And let's also define the fact that we're talking about movement, not exercise at the gym. And so it's exercise gym certainly counts, but that's not the only way to have this movement be effective for your constipation. I'm going back to our required watching, which is live to 100, the blue zones. Another theme is that there's more movement than average, I guess, built into their life, the way they do things. Like one of the places in like Italy, and that city is on a big, massive hill, and people don't really drive that much. And so they walk up these hills, down these hills to go to the grocery store, to go to see their friend, to go to wherever. And like, they're not like going to the gym to work out. They're just walking a lot and walking up a bunch of hills. So putting movement within your everyday thing, what you do.
I think so often, and I don't know what it's like in other countries or cultures, but definitely here in America, we have this idea that like everything, it's either exercise or it's not exercise. And that for it to count, it has to fall into this category of like exercise. But the fact is that most people maintain their health and their range of motion and their strength just through their regular, normal, everyday activities. And if you continue to place the demands on your body to complete an activity, then your body will rise to that occasion the vast majority of the time, unless something happens to interrupt that, right?
Yep.
So again, getting out of this idea that it has to be going to the gym. Again, not that I'm not encouraging people to out and get exercise. Obviously, there are lots of benefits to that. But just being active in your own life, choosing to be participatory in as many ways as possible that require your body to actually move has huge long-term health impacts, not just for pooping, but for other things as well.
Yep, totally.
Hey there, it's Emilia. Listen, I am so thrilled to have a great resource like Ask Sammy as part of the CareLab team, and here's why. It's a game changer for aging in place because it makes it so simple. All you do is ask. Just type in your question or even tell Sammy what the problem is and get tailored solutions. Everything from innovative adaptive equipment to comprehensive resources. It's a great way to become more empowered, to live more independently, and to live with greater confidence. And my favorite thing about how Ask Sammy works is it's deeply rooted in dignity and practicality. So whether you're a fellow therapist, a care partner, or someone who's seeking solutions for themselves, visit www.asksammy.com. We're going to link it in the show notes so you can find it there. Start making home more accessible today. Now, back to the show.
Okay, gravity. Gravity is like, I talk about this all the time. It's almost no matter what the setting is, but I definitely talk about it all the time when I'm like treating in the hospital or rehab, because what happens when people are in the hospital?
They lay on the bed.
No one wants them to get up. So they're laying down all the time. But your bowels aren't meant to work with you in a laying down position. They're meant to work as the rest of your body is, with gravity pushing down. Like your whole body is meant to work with you being upright most of the time, not laying down most of the time. So when we think of, and then what happens when people are in the hospital, what's one of the most common issues that people have? And we always want to make sure that they poop before they leave. Why? Because people get constipated when they're in the hospital. Of course, there are medications and many things involved, but one of the big reasons is just the fact that people are lying down all the time. So how can we be as much as possible in an upright position? Or how can we facilitate people being in an upright position as safely as possible, as much as possible, depending on the situation, so that gravity can do its job to push the poo out?
Yep, that's it. Yeah, like our normal stuff. And even if you're in the bed, like if you're visiting a family member or a friend, or you're caring for somebody, like either getting them out of the bed and sitting in the chair that's next to their, if every hospital room does two things. They have a chair and they have a bed that sits up like a chair. And so the more we can facilitate that, even if it's just like a couple minutes is all they can handle, those little things matter.
It really does. That's also like one of the reasons why I try to be a big proponent for, if someone is bed bound and they're being cared for at home, I'm a big proponent for trying to have a higher quality hospital bed in that situation. I know that's really, really hard to do because hospital beds are very expensive. They're not well funded, unfortunately, by insurance. And you like have to fall into like this very tight little category to even get a pretty basic hospital bed. But I mean, one of the things that I like to advocate for and talk about is the fact that people who are homebound at home, they do need better quality beds for obviously things like wound prevention and to make care provision easier and safer. But also, you know, if we can get people into that kind of like chair mode position or that kind of more seated level position that we can do in hospital beds a lot of the time, actually in hospitals, if we can bring that over into home, it actually really helps to prevent a lot of other medical problems and helps to keep that person healthier in a lot of ways. Constipation just being one of them. But of course, it helps to support pulmonary health. So the way, you know, pulmonary people's breathing helps to support your breathing, helps to prevent people from getting pneumonia. It helps to keep their heart stronger because the heart is meant to work against gravity. It helps to promote feeding and eating, right? So people aren't getting aspiration pneumonia where food is going down the wrong pipe and getting into the lungs and causing pneumonia. So there are lots of good reasons like to advocate for people being able to access higher quality hospital beds and equipment like that at home. Of course, constipation is just one of them, but it is a big one because you can have really serious medical problems related to constipation.
Yeah, you totally can. And I think one of the things that people think about at home first is a hospital bed. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get the functionality of a hospital bed without necessarily getting the one that insurance covers, including.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, there's like a, there's a lot of ways to go about it. And just briefly, I could say sleep is also a really important factor in your life. And so if the mattress that you're used to sleeping on is great, then you should try to keep it if you can. And you can add wedges to the bed so that's easier for you to sit up. You can maybe take that mattress and put it on an adjustable base so that then you can raise it up and down that way. And then also there's a whole chair that lays completely flat like a bed. It's like a twin size bed, but also sits up and as much as a lift chair would do so that you can like walk out of the bed, if that makes sense. If movement is hard, and then also sit up fully upright with your feet down, your head up, so you can be in that sitting position, even if it's really challenging for somebody to help you do that or for you to do it for yourself. So there's a lot of, you know, environmental and equipment ways to try to maximize that, especially in the home environment where it's so much easier to stay laying down longer because there's less help around. Like we rail on hospitals, but also if you're in the hospital, you should be seeing a therapist probably, and you got CNAs and people who are trying to prod you to sit up. If I don't feel like it, but there is infrastructure around that, and you lose a lot of that when you go home.
And there's enough people there to help support that, right? If you're someone who needs two people to help get up into a sitting position, then hopefully, you know, you've got your CNA or PCA, you've got a nurse there. Hopefully you should have therapy coming to see you as well. And they can either work with an aide or the OT and PT can work together to get someone into that position. When people go home, especially if they're going home with a family caregiver, it's pretty unlikely the family caregiver is necessarily going to be able to provide that support independently. So, I mean, because it's just not always physically possible, certainly not if you don't have the correct equipment in place. So yeah, getting creative, having the right equipment is absolutely so important for folks who are bedbound in a home care situation. One of the other things, I'll be interested to hear if you talk about this too with folks. If someone is like, I'm actively working with someone and they're having trouble having a bowel movement, like right in the moment, yes, no movement in the moment. Then one of the strategies I like to teach people is to like insert some movement into that like body movement into the active situation. So having people kind of lean forward, lean backward, lean side to side, even doing like a little kind of like massage on the lower part of the belly that sort of follows the follows the movement or like the track that the bowel follows. So we're kind of trying to work and massage things along.
Yep.
It seems like really simple, but it can be super, super effective to help start getting some movement in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And another thing I'd add is like while we do rail about toilets being too low, there kind of is a functional reason for why we started with toilets that are the height that they are, and it's to put you in that flex position at your hips, so your knees are kind of in your chest, and that you're in a squatting position but supported by the toilet, which is the best way to get those bowels moving. And so I've worked with, my practice is centered around diaphragm equipment. So I've recommended risers and things like that on toilets and been denied by patients because like I actually have a lot of chronic constipation and I need to sit in this low position to have my best bowel movement. I'm like, great, I understand. Let's install a grab bar on the wall or put rails on the toilet and not raise the height up. So don't think that every solution is for you if you listen to your body and you know that you need that. So getting a lower squatting position, if at all possible, is helpful.
Yeah, they also make these, so quick little story about my dad. My dad had this idea like probably 15 or 20 years ago to have like a stool that would like fold away and then pop out so that you could have a higher toilet, but get your knees sort of above your hips to get in that like squatting position. He talked, he was like, this is the best idea, but he like never quite pulled the trigger on it. And then I want to say someone on Shark Tank did. And I remember like getting a call from my dad and be like, someone on Shark Tank stole my
squatty potty
idea.
Yes.
Squatty potty. And you know what? It's a great idea. And I'm sorry to my dad that he didn't, get there first. But yeah, the folks at Squatty Potty, that's a great kind of solution for people who need that height to have a safe transfer getting on and off the toilet, getting up and down, but also be able to get in that better kind of more natural position for having a bowel movement. Because it can be really difficult to be sitting high and, your knees are kind of below your hips. It's just not the most natural way to kind of get things moving along.
CareLab listeners, it's Brandy, and as the founder of a platform made to make aging in place easier for everyone, I knew it would be incomplete if we did not have education, especially for caregivers. So whether you're a family caregiver or somebody who trains a whole organization, Higher Standards Caregiver training videos are for you. I'm so proud that we were able to partner together with Emilia in order to provide these to you because they're easy for everybody. You get great occupational therapist-led training on topics like transfers and how to care for someone as they age, or maybe as things change when you have Parkinson's. So no matter if you're the loved one who doesn't know exactly what to do next because things are getting different, or if you're a professional who trains caregivers that go into the community and you need some quality education, you get both from Higher Standards Caregiver Training. And you need to check them out at higherstandardscaregivertraining.com. There's also a whole host of things that you can eat or drink that can help stimulate a bowel movement. So I always offer like, hey, are you a coffee drinker? Do you like coffee? Can we add a little more coffee to your life? I know you just try to take caffeine out of your life, but coffee can really stimulate a bowel movement.
Yeah, I think I always recommend, because there are so many, you can't have this conversation without talking about nutrition.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're talking about what is coming out of your body because of what you put into your body. So being mindful of what seems to help, versus what seems to not help is really important. I also think it's a really good idea, though, if chronic constipation is an issue, to have a talk with a dietitian. Like a registered dietitian could be really, really helpful in this situation. Especially if you are on a lot of different medications, if you have a lot of health conditions, or the person you're caring for has a lot of medications or complicated health conditions, because the registered dietitian, along with like your doctor, is going to be able to help guide you in what are going to be appropriate suggestions for you nutritionally without kind of interfering with any different medications. Like, for example, people who are on Coumadin are often told not to eat green leafy vegetables, right? But those are full of fiber and they're healthy for you. And so, knowing, really working with your healthcare team to figure out what are going to be safe options for someone who is medically complicated or who might have a lot of medications is kind of an important part of that. But if you're just like a healthy person who suffers from chronic constipation, again, that mindfulness and thinking about what you're putting in is influencing how well it can come out.
Yep.
That can make huge game changer.
And I think the other thing that dietitians are really awesome at is not just telling you what can match with the medicines and your conditions, but also what's culturally relevant for you. Like if I tell you that this is great for you to eat and it'll help your body, but you don't like it or you've never cooked with it before, the likelihood of you actually doing it is basically zero. And so their job is not just to be seen as the smart people. Their job is to actually help you find functional ways to change your diet to improve your health. And so that's the other reason I think it's really impactful to talk to somebody directly about it as opposed to maybe just randomly Googling stuff, because then they can really help you niche it down to what works for your life.
Was that a pun? Impactful.
It was not a pun at all. And now every time I say the word impact, I'm going to think about bowel impaction.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're
all
welcome.
All weekend.
Yeah, you're welcome for that. No, but I think that to your point, that really does highlight the benefit of like working with an actual expert and professional who knows their stuff in that area versus like going to Dr. Google, because even things that seem pretty simple, you can actually get yourself in a lot of trouble on accident, or like maybe it's just not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And when there are folks out there who like are experts at what they do, we should use them, right?
Totally. And all the things that you like eat and you're like, this doesn't make me feel good, so I don't eat it. Like they probably could tell you like the theme underlying that and say like, oh, actually maybe you're lactose intolerant and you should cut down on that. And you do. And then you're like, oh, I feel a lot better. Like,
yeah. Yeah. And like you said, also give you alternate suggestions instead of just saying, well, you have to cut this out of your diet.
Right.
Help you figure out like a real functional way to actually like eat and enjoy eating while meeting all of those needs at the same time. I think dietitians, like registered dietitians, are way underutilized and have such a big role to play. I wish that like they got a little bit more credit for what they do, and that they were involved more directly and more often in a lot of things, because I think that they could just make this huge impact. And just in case you're wondering, a nutritionist is not the same as a registered dietitian. I really recommend that you work with a registered dietitian if you possibly can. No knock on nutritionists, but technically anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, and a registered dietitian actually has to go through an accredited program, and there's licensure involved in that. So like you're getting the goods, basically, is what I'm saying.
And there's a up and coming movement. Not that they haven't been doing this before, but it's becoming more well known, I should say.
You are so full of puns.
Is food as medicine. And so I'm hopeful that like dietitians, one, that the field will grow, and also it'll grow in notoriety that we'll use it more effectively. But like there's a whole movement of people trying to help you understand that food is also medicine, and we can really tailor the things that we eat. Maybe not for your whole life, but just like for a time period to really be helpful to like the same way we use medicine. And there's a lot of applications and technology, and there's just a whole ton of things in that space. If you Google food as medicine, that are trying to help you understand what you can do to improve how you feel and what your body is doing by what the things are that you put in it.
I wonder, have you gotten to any episodes in the Blue Zones series about food? Like there's got to be nutrition stuff in there.
Totally is.
I would imagine.
Totally is. And I think the theme around that was fresh, healthy foods, fresh and local foods. Because like I said, all of the Blue Zones are in very different parts of the world. So the types of food they're eating is different. But the theme is that it's real food and not processed.
It's not processed.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. No hot Cheetos.
No Takis. Sorry.
Ooh, I think Takis. I don't know if there's anything actually of this earth.
I don't think so.
I don't think so in Takis. It's not to say I've never eaten a Taki. I have, but it was gross and I didn't get it.
We eat things that are edible, not necessarily that they're food. And that's an unfortunate place we are in American society, is that we feel like things that are tasty are food, but they just happen to be edible. I mean, other things are edible. You could learn to eat dirt. You could learn to eat bugs. People do that, right? But that doesn't make it food or nutritionist. What's the word I'm looking for? Nutritious? There we go. Nutritious. So yeah, that's like a huge problem with us. But yeah, the theme is that you got to eat real food. And even like I said, one of the places was Italy, and they eat lots of pasta, but they make the pasta from real foods and it's fresh. And like, it's that, and then moderation.
Yeah. Homemade pasta is not that hard to make. Actually, it's a little bit time consuming, but it's not difficult. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do if I have time, is make homemade pasta, because it's so delicious. Oh yeah. And it's so easy. It's literally, well, I guess it depends what kind you make, but it's just like durum wheat and eggs and water and salt. That's all it is. So it's full of protein. Like, real pasta is just packed with protein. Yeah.
So we've been
that's all. It's super easy.
I mean, we might have to add it. Like what we did just recently for Valentine's Day is we made sushi. We learned how to make our own sushi rolls. And so like our whole family we sat at the table and we made sushi. And the kids really loved it, and everybody thought it was fun. And maybe we have to learn how to make some pasta.
Yeah. And it is like, it's a fun activity to do together too. My kids like to help me. I will say, like, I'm a bit of a cheater. I don't have I'm not hand cutting my pasta or anything. I've got the pasta attachment for my KitchenAid, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. So like, if you have a KitchenAid, I would recommend that if you're making your own pasta, just because it makes it so much easier. Mm-hmm. But the kids love to do it, and like, they help hold the pasta and they put it on the drying rack. And anyway, it's cool, and it's not that hard to do. I'm sure, depending on, I guess if you're like hand rolling your own tortellini and ravioli, I'm not that fancy. I'm talking spaghetti and fettuccine here, people.
Right. That's the basic ones, the simple ones.
Just noodles. I'm making noodles. Mm-hmm. But they're delicious noodles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, not sure how we got to noodle making, but
nutrition.
Oh, we were talking
real
about
food.
Nutrition, and like what people are eating. But it sounds like the moral of the story is like whole, healthy foods, local foods, things that have not been processed, like actual real food.
Yep.
Getting back to this idea of like functional ways that we can help manage constipation, though, is there anything else? I mean, we've covered it pretty.
I was going to say we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I think I just want to put another highlight on the point that you should listen to what your body is telling. And, things that are supposed to happen regularly, if they don't happen regularly for you, there is a reason for that. And it's not just that you're weird or something like that. There's a functional reason. And if we can come up with what that reason is, then you can probably solve the problem, because nobody should be a regular pill taker for things that are regular. Like, we need to take pills to deal with like infections and things that happen to us. But we should strive, I should say, to not be on medications for regular things that are supposed to regularly happen. We should try to come up with the underlying reason and try to use those medicines as sparingly as we can. That way they can work for us when we do really need them for an acute issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of times it can be easier to figure out that root cause than we think if we just take the time to be mindful, listen to our bodies, and then like really keep track of things. And I kind of go back to like having like a beverage diary, have a food diary, have an activity diary. There are so much of the time there are patterns that underlie whatever the problem is. This is absolutely the case for fall prevention, for example. I mean, anytime I go in and treat someone for falls or fall prevention, it always starts with a detailed conversation. Mm-hmm. And 99.9% of the time within that conversation, it's very clear to identify the root cause, and then we can tackle it.
Yep.
We can do that right then and there in about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't actually take that long if you think about it. And when we can find that root cause, we can solve the problem. and then it's not really a problem anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do the same thing with so many problems that have a functional root. And most of our problems, because we don't operate, we're not in a vacuum. We are a product of the way that we live in the world and the impacts that that has on us. So if you can take the time to be mindful, find the pattern, so often the time we can find those root causes, and then that actually allows you to really get to the bottom of the problem and solve it.
And if that feels overwhelming, or you just feel like you don't have time to stop and think about those things, you need to like eat what's available to you and keep moving and go to work. You work 2 jobs or whatever. I would challenge you to find even just 2 minutes in your day to just jot down what it is that you did that day or what you ate, and then go back over it a week or 2 later. And just, it does not have to take a whole long time commitment to gather this information about yourself. But it can have a huge impact on what goes on in your everyday life. Because if your body doesn't feel good, if your body's not up to its top performing condition at wherever level you're at, then everything else that you do is impacted by that. You might have to be calling off work more often, and that's money lost. And there's just so many scenarios that have much bigger impact than taking the time to use an app or something like that to remind you and to ask you and give you a place to put down some of this information so that you can try to keep track, so that you can like find the root causes, including like headaches, for example. Like even migraines, that's a medical condition that surely needs to be treated, but it also has a ton of environmental triggers, and it's still about what's going on in your life. So if you have headaches regularly and you're always taking aspirin, like that's something you should stop and think about. That's all we're saying is like stop and think about those things, and maybe something that you're doing or not doing, eating or not eating, is having an impact on it.
Yeah. I've a handful of times worked with folks, migraine I think is a great example, who have like chronic migraine, and I approach it from like a lifestyle redesign perspective. Let's look at all of the patterns here, and then let's figure out what we can do in a way that is actually going to fit into your lifestyle that can interrupt what we're finding are the triggers for your migraine. And it can be incredibly effective. And of course, like, you know, you and I we're OTs. We don't deal in medications. It's not part of our scope of practice. So everything that we do, that doesn't mean that sometimes people don't need to go see the doctor and they don't need medications. Yeah. Of course, that's true. But everything that we do in the scope of our practice has to be functionally centered. And so it's incredible the problems that you can solve when actually like taking a pill isn't the first go-to, when you have to look at those root causes, and then, you know, you can really, really interrupt that cycle and make a huge difference. Like you said, it's true for constipation. It's true for pretty much anything that you can put your finger on. And it's not really until we figure out what those root causes are that we can actually take meaningful steps to improving the lives of anyone.
Exactly.
All right.
I think we CareLab.
I think we CareLab the heck out of that.
Yep, we did.
If you had any questions about pooping, I hope that, or constipation. I mean, we could talk more about pooping or wiping, or there's
lots of ways for that. Listen, OT spend most of our life in the bathroom, so like we have lots of things to talk about. But we talked about constipation today. We guarantee you we will talk about more poop and toilets in the future. So stay tuned. That's
a promise.
Stay tuned.
So make sure, if you want to hear more about bathroom issues, make sure that you like this episode, subscribe to the podcast, make sure that you follow us wherever you are finding us, so that you know when the next episode comes out. If you have a question that you want us to #CareLab, then please make sure that you leave it in the comments. Please tag us if you do that so that we can see it. So we'll get a special notification and see that in there. Yeah, other than that, I think that's it.
That's it.
Brandy?
That's it.
All right.
We'll see y'all next time.
See you next time. All right, bye.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.